The wind howled down the Bitterroot Valley like a pack of wolves with a grudge, carrying snow that stung like needles. It was late December 1947, and Montana had decided to remind everyone who really owned the land. Temperatures had plunged to 20 below zero for 3 nights running, and the fourth promised worse. In the small settlement of Alder Creek, folks burned through their woodpiles faster than they could drag logs home on sleds. Chimneys smoked day and night, but the cold slipped through every crack, every poorly chinked log, every window pane that rattled in its frame. At the edge of the valley, where the pines thinned and the slope rose toward the ridge, stood Elias Harper's place. Elias had come back from the war 4 years earlier with a limp, a quiet manner, and ideas nobody asked for. He'd bought the 40 acres cheap because the soil was rocky and the access poor. Most figured he'd fail by the first hard freeze. Instead, he built. Not just any cabin. He started with a solid log shell, pine and fir, hand-notched, chinked tight with clay and moss. Standard enough. Then he did the thing that made people stop their wagons on the county road and stare. He wrapped the whole damn thing in metal. Sheets of corrugated tin, salvaged from an abandoned mine barracks up near Hamilton, nailed over the logs with roofing felt sandwiched between. The roof got double layers, edges folded and sealed with tar he'd boiled himself. The windows, small double-paned ones he'd ordered special from Missoula, were framed in tin too, like little metal picture frames set into the shining skin. From a distance, the cabin looked like a silver box someone had dropped in the trees. Up close, it gleamed coldly under the winter sun, throwing reflections that hurt the eyes. They laughed, of course. Old man Pritchard, whose family had ranched the valley since before statehood, rode by one afternoon with his boys and hooted. "Elias, you gone and turned your house into a sardine can. Gonna open it up come spring and find fish inside?" The Harper place became a regular stop for gossip. Women at the general store clucked their tongues. Poor man's lost his mind after the war. Men at the saloon bet on how long before the tin peeled off in the wind, or the place turned into an icebox. "Metal conducts cold," they said, with the certainty of men who'd never read a book on heat transfer. "It'll be begging at my door for a corner by the stove come January." Elias didn't argue. He just nodded politely when folks rode up to offer advice, then went back to work. He dug a trench around the foundation and packed it with gravel for drainage. He built a small lean-to woodshed attached to the south wall, stacked tight with split pine. Inside, he installed a modest cast-iron stove, not the biggest model, just efficient. He ran a simple stovepipe through the roof with a damper he'd fashioned himself. Most curiously, he buried 4-inch clay pipes under the floorboards, routing them from the stove's ash pit out through the foundation and into a shallow stone-lined pit 10 feet from the cabin. He called it his heat loop, though he never explained it to anyone who asked. When the first real cold snap hit in early December, the valley braced. Thermometers bottomed out at -18. Smoke rose straight up in the still air like gray pillars. Families huddled. Children slept in piles under every quilt they owned. The Pritchards burned through half their winter wood in 10 days and started eyeing the barn beams. Elias's cabin showed no smoke most mornings. People noticed. "Probably froze to death already," Pritchard said at the store. "Tin can holds the cold in." A few of the Boulder boys, teenagers mostly, skied up the slope one moonlit night to peek through a window. They came back eye-wide. "Lights on," one whispered. "He's reading a book, shirt sleeves." "Bull." "I swear, thermometer on the wall said 68 degrees. The story spread like snow melting spring. Nobody believed it at first. Then the cold deepened. Christmas came and went with no let-up. Power lines snapped under ice. The county road closed. Alder Creek turned inward, each house a small fortress against the white dark. On New Year's Eve, the temperature dropped to -24. Wind came up from the north, 40 miles an hour, driving the wind chill to God knows where. Windows cracked from the pressure. Pipes burst in basements. The Pritchards' oldest girl came down with pneumonia. The doctor couldn't make it through the drifts.
At dawn on January 2nd, Pritchard's wife bundled herself in every coat she owned and set off on snowshoes towards Elias's place. She carried a jar of beans and a plea. She found him splitting wood in the lean-to, coat open, cheeks barely pink. "Morning, Mrs. Pritchard," he said, as though it were May. She stared. No smoke from the chimney. The tin walls were frosted on the outside, yet when she stepped closer, she felt warmth radiating off them like a low sun. "Elias, how?" He set the axe down. "Come in if you like." Inside, it was 68 degrees, steady. Not hot, not cold, just right. A small fire murmured in the stove, more glow than blaze. The clay pipes under the floor were warm to the touch. Heat rose gently, circulated, sank again through the loop outside, cooled, returned. The metal skin, contrary to every neighbor's certainty, wasn't conducting cold inward. It reflected radiant heat back into the cabin, while the felt layer and logs provided insulation. The bright surface shed snow fast, prevented ice dams, kept the roof load light. The buried heat loop pulled warmth into the earth during the day and returned it slowly at night, stabilizing the interior like a slow heartbeat. Mrs. Pritchard stood in the doorway, jar of beans forgotten in her mittens. Tears froze on her lashes before they could fall. "My girl is sick. We're down to kindling. I didn't know where else." Elias didn't lecture. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply packed a sled with split wood, a sack of potatoes, dried apples, and a tin of salve he'd made from pine resin and bear fat. Then he walked her home. The valley changed after that. Not overnight. Pride takes time to thaw. But one by one, families made the trek up the slope. Some came for warmth. Some came for advice. He showed them, without fanfare, how radiant barriers worked, how mass and reflection beat brute force insulation in extreme cold, how a little earth coupling could turn a house into something alive. He never charged a dime. He just asked that they pay it forward when the spring came. By February, the worst of the cold broke. The valley exhaled. Creeks cracked open. Cattle lowed again. The Pritchard's girl recovered. When the county road cleared, word spread beyond Alder Creek. A reporter from Missoula drove up in a rattling Ford, took photographs of the shining cabin, scribbled notes. "War veteran beats Montana winter with tin can," the headline read. People clipped it, mailed it to cousins in Minnesota and Maine. Elias didn't care for the attention. He patched the roof where a branch had scraped it, stacked next winter's wood, read his books by the window. The metal still gleamed, though now it wore a patina of pine needles and weather. Neighbors no longer laughed when they passed. Some waved, some stopped to talk. A few even asked if he'd help them wrap their own places before the next freeze. He always said yes. Years later, when the old cabin finally gave way to a newer house, still metal-clad, still warm, folks in the valley told the story to their grandchildren. They told it not as a tale of cleverness alone, but of quiet stubbornness, of listening to the land and the physics instead of the crowd. They told how the man they once mocked had kept his word steady at 68 degrees while the rest of them shivered. And every time the wind howled down the Bitterroot Valley carrying snow like a warning, someone would look up toward the ridge and smile. The tin cans still stood, still warm.